Alright guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be focusing on proving lines parallel, and we're going to show that mastery by earning at least an 80% on an exit ticket. Hopefully you have the notes page in front of you. If you don't, take out a separate sheet of paper and we'll get you a fresh copy tomorrow. Now, it's important when we talk about proving lines parallel, all the previous problems we've done with transversals, we've been given parallel lines and told that they are parallel, so we can use our different angle types. The problem becomes when we're not told they're parallel and given angle types, we need to prove them parallel. There are 5 ways we can prove them parallel, and these are the only 5 ways we can prove them. The first way that we can prove them parallel is show that corresponding angles are congruent. We can show alternate interior angles are congruent. We can show alternate exterior angles are congruent. And then consecutive interior are supplementary, and our consecutive exterior are supplementary. Those are the only 5 ways we can do this. A linear pair and vertical angles, although we use them when we're solving transversal problems, they do not prove that 2 lines are parallel to each other. So even though you might have vertical angles, or even though you might have linear pair that's supplementary and adds to 180, they do not prove it parallel. The only ones that work are your corresponding angles, alternate interior, alternate exterior, consecutive interior, and consecutive exterior. So, if we look at some of these problems, the big thing you have to decide is where your transversal is going to be, because obviously when you have 4 lines, any of the 4 lines can be your transversal. So you want to look that your transversal has both the angles on it. In the case of number 1, my transversal is line A. Well, now if I look at those angles, I have 50 in the bottom left and 50 in the top right. These angles are alternate interior, which means they need to be congruent. Because they are congruent, we know the lines are parallel. To figure out which lines they are, you have to figure out which 2 lines contain the angles. This top 50 is on line C. This bottom 50 is on line D. So C is parallel to D by alternate interior angles. A is our transversal. It's not one of our parallel lines. B doesn't work because it doesn't have any of our angles on it. If we look at example 2, again, we still have 4 lines, but we need to find the line that contains both our angles. Well, if I look, line D contains both the angles, so that's going to be my transversal. Well, I have to decide what those 2 angle types are. They are consecutive exterior. They're on the same side of the transversal, and they're both exterior, and they add up to equal 180 degrees. Well, they do. 50 plus 130 is 180. So now to decide my parallel lines, D is my transversal. We have to look what 2 lines intersect the transversal. Well, in this case, A is parallel to B by consecutive exterior angles. Example 3 is a little different because we have more than 2 angles. So we're going to take it one piece at a time. The first transversal I'm going to highlight is B. And if I look at B, I see the 50 and the 50, and they're both in the top right-hand corner. So these are my corresponding angles, and that means they need to be congruent. Well, they are congruent. So in this case, we have C is parallel to D by my corresponding. Now, we do have a second transversal. So if I look at my second transversal, line C, we notice we have 50 and 130. Now, again, just like problem 2, 50 plus 130 is 180, and these are consecutive exterior, which we know adds to 180. They're on the same side of the transversal, so they are the consecutive, and they're exterior. So not only do we have C parallel to D by corresponding, we also have A is parallel to B by consecutive exterior angles. So you can't just stop because we found one answer. In this case, both sets of lines are parallel. And you can't assume that they're parallel just because they look it. You actually have to solve out the math. If you can find one of the 5 angle types, they're now parallel. Example 4, again, we have 3 different angles. I'm going to start with my transversal C. If you notice, 50 and 130 again, but they're inside this time. So these are my consecutive interior, which still have to add up to 180. Well, they do, so A is parallel to B by consecutive interior angles. But we also have a second transversal because we have the 250s. So if I highlight A as my transversal, you notice you have 50 and 50. Well, those two are alternate exterior angles, which means they have to be congruent, and they are. So that tells me C is parallel to D by alternate exterior. Again, if you have more than one transversal that contains 2 angles, you need to check all those angle types just to make sure that they are either parallel by one of our 5 types or they're not parallel because we don't have one of those 5 types. Please bring your notes and any questions you have to class tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you then.